good evening, and welcome to the Drowsy Archive. Tonight, we are going back a little more than 800 years to an abbey in the English countryside around the year 1200 to spend one full night and one full day inside a medieval monastery. There's nothing you need to remember here. There will be no test, no sudden noises, no surprises, only bells and candlelight and the slow, patient rhythm of a place where every hour has its purpose and nothing ever needs to hurry. If you drift off somewhere between the midnight prayers and the morning garden, that is not a failure. That is the point. The monks themselves would approve. Theirs was a life built around rest as much as prayer, a life that trusted the day to repeat itself again and again, whether or not anyone stayed awake to watch it. So settle in, let your shoulders sink, let the day you just had grow quiet behind you. It is a few minutes before midnight, in the darkest part of the night, and somewhere below the dormitory, a single monk is awake, watching a candle slowly burn down toward a mark that means it is almost time. The dormitory is a long room above the cloister. Wooden beams overhead, small windows set high in the stone walls. Down each side runs a row of low beds, simple frames, straw mattresses, woolen blankets, and in each one, a monk sleeping in his habit, ready to rise without dressing. The room smells of wool and tallow and old timber. Outside, the night is clear and cold. An owl calls once from the orchard wall and is not answered. There are perhaps 40 men sleeping here. Novices near the door, older brothers further in, and at the far end, the prior, whose responsibility it is to see that everyone rises when the bell sounds. Some of the older monks sleep lightly now, waking on their own a few moments before they are called, the habit of decades keeping time inside them more faithfully than any candle. In the church below, the sacrist moves along the aisle with a taper, lighting the candles for the night office, one by one. Each small flame steadies itself, leans, and stands upright. The great building gathers the light slowly. Pillars emerge from the dark. The painted ceiling stays hidden, too high for candlelight to reach. He pauses at the water clock in its corner, a patient, dripping thing. Water falls, drop by drop, from an upper vessel into a lower basin, and a small float rises with the water, hour by hour, past marks worn faint with use. It needs tending, refilling, adjusting for the cold, for water runs slow on winter nights, and the sacrist tends it the way he tends the candles, because in a world with no striking clocks, this quiet dripping is how the monastery knows when to sing. He reads the float against its mark, satisfied, and crosses to the bell rope. And in the dormitory, the bell arrives not as sound, so much as expectation fulfilled. A low bronze voice rolling through the floorboards. The monks rise in silence. No one speaks. Speech sleeps at this hour, even when men do not. One by one they file down the night stairs, a worn stone staircase leading directly from the dormitory into the south transept of the church, built so the monks can pass from sleep to prayer without ever stepping into the night air. 800 years later, in the abbeys that still stand, you can see those stairs hollowed in the middle, worn into soft curves by exactly this moment, repeated tens of thousands of times. Their sandals make almost no sound. Candle shadows sway along the walls as they descend and take their places in the wooden choir stalls, facing one another across the aisle. As the last echo of the bell fades somewhere high in the tower, this is Matins, the great night office. Its name comes from the Latin word for of the morning, because in the church's reckoning, this is the first prayer of the new day, a day that begins here in the deepest dark, hours before any light. Sometimes it is called vigils, the watch. It is the longest of the 8 daily services, sung in the middle of the night, when the world outside is at its stillest. St. Benedict, who wrote the rule. These monks lived by almost 7 centuries before this night, set out the reasoning simply. The night hours were quiet, undisturbed, the best hours for keeping watch, and so, every night of every year, midwinter or midsummer, feast or famine, the community rises in darkness and sings. A single voice begins, the cantor intoning the opening verse. Then the 2 sides of the choir answer one another, back and forth, psalm after psalm, one side singing a verse, the other replying. A slow tide of Latin moving across the aisle and back again. The psalms are sung from memory. Most of these men have sung them so many times that the words rise on their own, the way breath rises, and Benedict knew his monks well. His rule gently insists that the brothers support those who grow drowsy, and orders the longer lessons read at night, precisely so that everyone has something to listen to while standing still in the small hours. Here and there, a head nods, an older brother's chin sinks toward his chest, and the monk beside him touches his sleeve without judgment, and the old man straightens and finds his place in the psalm again, mid-verse, having never entirely left it. The candles burn lower, wax gathers in slow stalactites. Outside nothing moves but the river beyond the wall, going about its own endless office, if you let the sound of it fill your mind. Voices rising and falling in a building too large and too dark to see the ends of. You may find the edges of the room beginning to soften. The monks would tell you the night office is long. They would also tell you that there's a particular sweetness in prayer offered while the rest of the world sleeps. A sense of keeping the lamps lit on behalf of everyone else, on behalf of the plowman asleep in the village, the shepherd in his hut, the king in his castle. All of them held, without knowing it, inside this patient singing. When the last psalm ends, the monks do not linger. They climb the night stairs again, lie down in their habits, and sleep a second sleep. This is one of the quiet mercies of the medieval night, and not only inside monastery walls, sleep in two halves with a waking hour between. Villagers knew it too, the first sleep and the second, and thought nothing strange about it. The body, given a long winter night, seems to find this rhythm on its own. And if you've ever woken at 3 in the morning and worried that something was wrong with you, the Middle Ages would like you to know that nothing is wrong with you at all. You are simply keeping an older schedule. The second sleep is often the deeper one. The dormitory settles. Breathing slows and evens down the long row of beds. And then, at the first gray hint of dawn, the hour the monks call first light, when you can just begin to tell one thing from another, the bell sounds again, gentler this time, for Lauds, the office of praise that greets the morning. The church is different now. The east window has begun to glow faintly. Stone tracery standing black against a sky the color of pewter. The candles look smaller than they did at midnight. The psalms of Lauds are brighter too. Psalms of mourning, of light returning, of the world being handed back. By the time the office ends, the birds outside have started. First one, then the whole hedgerow. And the monastery, which has already been awake twice this night, begins its actual day. After the short office of prime, sung as the sun clears the horizon, the community walks in procession to the chapter house, a round or vaulted room off the cloister, with stone benches built along its walls, where the whole monastery meets once a day. They call it the chapter house because the meeting begins with a chapter, a single passage read aloud from the Rule of St. Benedict. A few paragraphs only, how the cellarer should behave, how guests should be received, how the monks should sleep, or eat, or care for the sick. 73 short chapters, read in order, over and over, year after year, so that a monk who lives 50 years in the abbey will hear the entire rule, read aloud perhaps 200 times, and will still, the abbot hopes, find something in it he'd not noticed before. Then the business of the day. The prior assigns the work. 2 brothers to the bakehouse, 3 to the fields with the lay servants, Brother Anselm to the infirmary to sit with old Brother Godric, whose mind now wanders pleasantly through decades that no one else remembers, the novices to their lessons, the copyists to the cloister, while the light is good. Faults are confessed here too, small ones, spoken plainly. A brother fell asleep at Matins, another broke a bowl through carelessness, another spoke during the silence. The penances are mild and practical, and then the matter is over, completely, in the way that things can only be over in a place where tomorrow will look exactly like today, and everyone will still be here, and there is nothing to gain by remembering. A short walk in the cloister follows. The covered stone gallery around its square of green grass, open to the garden air on one side. The day's weather is assessed. The garth is very green this morning. The bees are already working the lavender. And then the monastery goes to work. Along the north walk of the cloister, the side that catches the best light, the copyists settle at their carrels. Small wooden alcoves, each with a sloped desk, a stool, and this morning, a bar of early sun. Here is Brother Aldwin, who's been copying the same book of the Psalms since before Michaelmas. His tools are laid out in an order that has not changed in 30 years. 2 quills, cut from goose feathers, their nibs trimmed with a small knife that also lives exactly where it lives. A pot of ink, black as a rook's wing, made from oak-galls and iron salts. A ruler and a stylus for pricking and ruling the lines. Because every straight line of beautiful writing you have ever seen from this century began as a row of tiny pinpricks and a faint scored guide. The parchment itself was once a calf. It has been soaked, scraped, stretched, and dried until it is pale and smooth and slightly translucent, and it is expensive enough that nothing is written on it carelessly. Aldwin reads a line from the exemplar propped beside him, holds it in his mind, and writes. The quill makes a sound halfway between a whisper and a scratch. Letter by letter, word by word. He does not hurry because hurrying is how a page is ruined, and a page is a week. Dip, write, breathe. The sun moves slowly along the desk. In other carols, other work. A novice practices letter forms on a wax tablet, which forgives him endlessly. An older brother grinds a little more ink. Another rubricates, adding the red initials and headings to pages already written. Because even a working book should have some small festivity about it. There's no press, no duplicate, no backup. Every book in the Abbey's collection, 100 volumes perhaps, kept in a cupboard in the cloister wall, a number that makes this a respectable library. Every one of them exists because a man sat like this, morning after morning, for months, and wrote it out by hand. If the thought of that patience makes your own eyelids heavy, stay with the sound of the quill for a while. Dip, write, breathe. It is one of the most sleep-inducing sounds in history, and the men who made it knew so. More than one copyist grumbled in the margins about cold fingers and long mornings, and one famously wrote at the end of a manuscript, in the same careful hand as all the rest, "Now I've written the whole thing. For Christ's sake, give me a drink." The small offices punctuate the morning, the way milestones punctuate a road. terse in the middle of the morning's work, Sext at midday, short services, a few psalms, a hymn, and back out into the day. By now the singing is woven so deeply into the hours that the monks move to and from the church the way a tide moves, without deciding to. After Sext, in the summer ordering of the day, comes the meal, one main meal, taken together in the refectory, a long hall with trestle tables down each side, and at the head, a raised lectern, because no one speaks at meals. Instead, one brother, the weekly reader who ate earlier so that he can work now, stands at the lectern and reads aloud while the others eat. Lives of the saints, passages of scripture. The community eats with its hands busy and its ears occupied. And Benedict's rule, ever practical, orders the reader to take a little bread and watered wine beforehand, so that the reading is not performed by a man distracted by his own stomach. The food is plain, and, by the standards of the age, remarkably reliable. Bread from the abbey's own bakehouse, pottage, a thick vegetable stew that is, quietly, the foundation of the entire medieval world. Beans, cheese, eggs, fish from the abbey ponds on the many days when meat is not permitted, and ale brewed in the abbey brewhouse, weaker than what the alehouse in the village sells, and drunk by everyone at every meal, because it is made with boiled water and is therefore, although no one here could tell you why, safer than the well. And since no one may speak, the monks talk with their hands. Monastic sign language, a real, practiced vocabulary of gestures developed precisely for this room. The sign for bread, the sign for fish, 2 fingers moving like a fish's tail, a sign for more, a sign for enough. There are surviving lists of these signs from medieval abbeys, over 100 of them, including, inevitably, the signs that novices invent for things the official list never covered, which is its own quiet commentary on human nature. The reader's voice goes on, steady above the small sounds of spoons and cups. Sunlight leans through the tall windows and lies in long, warm panels across the floor. After the meal, in summer, comes the meridian, the midday rest. Benedict, who had lived in Italy, wrote the siesta into the rule itself. After the meal, the brothers may rest on their beds in silence or read quietly, and anyone who's eaten pottage in a warm room at noon knows exactly how quickly that quiet reading becomes something else. The monastery, for an hour, sleeps in the middle of the day, and no one anywhere in it feels the least bit guilty. The bell for none wakes the house gently in mid-afternoon, and the second half of the working day unrolls at a slightly softer angle than the first. In the physic garden, the infirmarian moves along his beds of herbs, sage, rue, fennel, comfrey, cutting what he needs and laying it in a shallow basket. The garden is planted in neat rectangles, each herb with its purpose, most of them grown here from cuttings that arrived years ago, wrapped in damp cloth carried from other monasteries, because that is how gardens traveled in this century, from cloister to cloister in the luggage of visiting monks. Beyond the wall, the orchard hums. The abbey keeps bees for honey and for candle wax. It keeps fish ponds stepped down the slope in a chain so the water stays fresh. It keeps a dovecote, a mill on the river, barns, byres, a brew house warm with the smell of malt. A monastery of this size is not a building. It is a small, self-possessed world, and a good deal of the afternoon is simply the sound of that world maintaining itself. A cart, a saw, the mill wheel turning, doves. The cellarer walks his stores with a tallow candle and a tally stick, barrels of ale, wheels of cheese ripening on their shelves, sacks of flour, salt fish for the winter. The rule describes the man this job requires with great tenderness, wise, mature, not greedy, not wasteful. Someone who should treat every pot and tool of the monastery as if it were sacred, and who must answer every request, even the ones he refuses, with a kind word. 800 years later, it remains a reasonable job description for anyone in charge of anything. And in the infirmary, at the quiet eastern edge of the precinct, the old monks live at a gentler tempo still. Here the rules soften. The fire is kept burning even when the rest of the house goes cold. There is meat in the pottage here for strength. Brother Godric, who professed his vows under an abbot 3 abbots ago, sits by the window in the afternoon sun, and Brother Anselm sits with him, listening for the 3rd time this week to the story of the great flood of 40 years past, when the river came up to the 2nd step of the church, and Anselm, who knows the story better than his own name by now, asks, because kindness sometimes looks like this, "And how high did the water come, brother?" "To the 2nd step." Imagine. The sun tilts, the shadows of the fish ponds lengthen. Somewhere the novices are singing their lesson, getting it slightly wrong in the patient direction of getting it right. As the light goes amber and the swallows come down low over the garth, the bell rings for Vespers, the great evening office, the day's quiet counterweight to Lauds. The church at this hour is at its most beautiful, and the monks, who are not supposed to be proud of anything, are collectively just a little proud of this. The west light comes through the nave in long, dusty beams. The candles are lit again, but softly now, against a building still half full of sunset. Vespers is unhurried, even by the standards of a house where nothing hurries. The psalms of the evening, the Magnificat, the voices are lower and warmer than they were at midnight. The sound of men who have been awake since the dark before dawn, and worked and eaten, and are now setting the day down the way you set down a full cup, carefully so that nothing spills. Afterwards, there is a light supper in the refectory, bread, ale, a little fruit from the orchard, and then, in the last usable light, the community gathers in the chapter house or the cloister for the collation, a short reading before bed. The name comes from the book they most often read at this hour, the Collations of the Desert Fathers, and it has drifted, over the centuries since, into our word for a light evening meal, because the reading and a small drink went together. Words wear down like stair treads, too. The novice master walks the cloister once, slowly. The sacrist checks his candles for midnight. The porter bars the gate, the great oak gate that is opened for pilgrims, merchants, beggars, bishops, and one memorable escaped pig every day of this year, and every year anyone can remember. And the monastery draws itself in for the night, like a hand closing gently. The last office of the day is Compline, from the Latin for completion. The day is finished, and this is how it is folded and put away. It is sung in near darkness, from memory, because it is always the same 3 psalms, the same hymn, the same short confession of the day's small failures, released now, all together, into the dark above the choir stalls, where they dissolve and are gone and will not be spoken of at tomorrow's chapter because they were spoken of here. The abbot's blessing, a last antiphon to the Virgin, sung slow and low, the kind of melody that was old when this church was new. And then the great silence begins. From now until after tomorrow's dawn, no one in this house will speak at all, not in the cloister not on the stairs, not in the dormitory. The silence is not emptiness. The monks would want you to understand this. It is a made thing, kept the way the garden is kept. Inside it, the abbey becomes pure sound. The river, the settling of timbers, an owl, perhaps our owl, trying the orchard again. 40 men breathing slower and slower in a long, dark room above the cloister. The monks lie down in their habits as the rule instructs, so that when the bell calls them at midnight, they can rise at once, without fumbling in the dark, always ready, as Benedict wrote, always prepared. The younger ones are asleep in moments. The older ones lie listening a little while to the river and the roof and the reliable nothing of the night, knowing that the candle is burning in its holder by the water clock, that the sacrist will wake, that the bell will sound, that the stairs will fill with soft footsteps, and the psalms will rise again in the dark, tonight and tomorrow night, and every night for the next 300 years, and that none of it requires them to be awake 1 minute longer. The lamp in the dormitory is a single small star at the far end of the room. The river keeps its own hours. Sleep well.